This is Earthfiles, the award-winning news site with the latest updates in science, environment, and real X-Files. Podcasting in-depth reports beyond the 6 o'clock news by Emmy Award-winning journalist Linda Moulton Howe.
Since early January 2008 and ongoing, there have been dozens of reports of lights moving in rapid and strange patterns and even changing shapes southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth in the Dublin and Stephenville, Texas region. On January 19th, one man videotaped a white disc near the Stephenville local airport, which turned into several minutes of flashing symbols and was shown on Fox Network News. In January, I reported about Ricky Sorrell's New Year's Day sunset sighting of a huge metallic structure embedded with cone-shaped holes that blotted out the sky above him while he was deer hunting. I was in Texas January 29th to February 1st and saw the maple woods where Ricky Sorrells was deer hunting and understood from the tree line why he estimated the craft was at least 1,000 feet long. I also learned that a police officer later saw a similar huge craft with embedded holes. Drawings of various craft and aerial lights seen in Texas are at my news website, earthfiles.com. A key figure in gathering information about unidentified aerial craft sightings from both citizens and several police officers who remain anonymous is 43-year-old Leroy Gayton. Leroy is the Erath County Constable in Precinct 2 at the Courthouse Annex in Dublin. Leroy has been constable about 4 years and a police officer for 17 years. Not only is he investigating, he and his son were eyewitnesses themselves to remarkable aerial lights on January 8, 2008. Then on February 2nd, between 2:50 and 4 a.m. Central Time, Leroy videotaped a disc-like object that was throwing off colors and looked like, quote, a spinning sun or Jupiter planet, throwing off colored strobe lights, unquote. Leroy told me, quote, what was so odd about it was when I zoomed in on my camera, it looked like a triangle or pyramid inside of the spinning disc, unquote. A week later, on February 9th, Constable Gayton saw the same spinning aerial object again, and his wife photographed more odd symbols pulsing in the sky. Events started when Leroy received a call around 10:30 p.m. from a man looking through his telescope from his home between Dublin and Stephenville.
I'm at Stephenville working a security job, and I see the damn thing again. I see it south towards Dublin. It just looks like an object that's spinning and hovering. Well, that's February the 9th, okay?
Right.
February the 9th, that evening at 10:30, I get a phone call from a guy who tells me, he says, hey, Leroy, that light's back up in the sky. It's southeast of your house. He said, I'm watching it through my telescope. Anyway, I bought my wife a pretty nice camera, and we saw it. It was traveling southeast towards the little town of Gustine, Gustine. We get in the car and drive about 15 miles, and my wife takes some pictures. Did you see that video that David Corrine had?
The projected symbols?
Yeah, how they were bouncing around?
Yep.
That's what this is on the pictures. They're green, yellow, white, red, and blue, doing some funky things in the sky.
And this is on February
the 9th at about 10:30. My wife took pictures.
They look like colored hieroglyphs?
Yes. You know, just like what David had. It's just like you're watching the video and you put it on pause. Exactly what his video is doing, that's what this thing's doing in my photos. But anyway, it ain't over yet, okay? This is about at 10:30 at night. About 11:30, I'd been earlier at my sister's house, and I'm telling her about it. She lives in town, and they can see this light from town. And they're all freaking out. Anyway, 11:30, we kind of lost sight of it where we were at, but they could still see it from town. Well, we come into town. The same guy that called me about the first one calls me again. He said, hey, Leroy, there's a second one. He said, it's coming in from around the Selden area coming towards Dublin. And sure enough, there's another one, same thing.
Projecting these symbols?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, At one time, we can see both of them in the sky. One of them's in the southeast, the other one's at the northeast sky. We take pictures of it also. And there are several witnesses, my sister, her husband, my niece, their neighbor. We still don't know what this is.
Right.
Okay, that's February the 9th. February the 10th, Sunday. I had to come up here to Dallas, and I forgot my cell phone. The next day I check it, and it's the same guy calling me back about 8:30. Left a message saying, Leroy, you're not going to believe this, but there's 5 of those lights flying around the Dublin area. The guy tells me with his telescope,
Right.
he said he could see like a capsule on top and one on bottom of this round thing. He said, and it's spinning around. He said, it's bouncing around the sky.
Is he in the Dublin area or the Stephenville area or?
Between Dublin and Stephenville somewhere. Okay. But I promised him that I would not release anything at all with him. And these pictures are really odd. You know what they look like? Remember there used to be a little thing called Light Bright or something, a little toy where you put these little plastic pegs and it would light up different colors? That's what it looked like.
In addition to the mysterious symbols projected into the night skies by spinning discs, one of the strangest sky dramas was witnessed by 3 men on January 8th. That's the night that dozens of eyewitnesses reported seeing strange combinations of flashing lights in the sky. Everyone said the lights were either on a single huge craft or were in a rigid formation. All agreed that the lights pulsed on and off, but randomly and not together. The earliest high strangeness that night began around 6:10 p.m. in Selden, Texas. 50-year-old Steve Allen is owner, president, and CEO of L&S Enterprises in Texas Freight, a trucking and transportation brokerage company in Glen Rose. Steve has also been a civilian pilot since the late 1970s when he learned to fly. As the sun was near setting, Steve traveled from his Glen Rose office to a hill in nearby Selden to sit by a campfire and relax before dark with 2 friends. Steve said the sun was still about halfway above the horizon when 4 extremely bright white lights in a rectangular pattern came speeding in the clear sky in total silence.
It seemed like it was traveling at a very high rate of speed. My initial estimates was between 2,000 and 3,000 miles an hour. It was gradually slowing down as we saw it. It came into range 15 to 20 miles away. By the time it got even with us, it was traveling a normal aircraft speed, probably anywhere around the 200 to 300 mile an hour range. It looked like it was traveling at about 2,500 to 3,000 foot above ground level, and it was approximately 1/2 mile north of our location. So that put it within a mile of where we was at. As it went past us, that's when the show started. The lights in the rear, we could see the 2 corner lights, what we presumed to be the corner lights. As it came past us, there became more lights in the rear. I think there was either 7 or 8. And it went on to Stephenville, which is about 3 more miles into town, is the way the bird flies.
You had 4 lights in 4 corners, making a rectangle perhaps a mile long and a half mile wide.
Right. They was flashing.
Where did these other 5 lights appear in the rear?
That's after it went past us. That's when we could see the rear of whatever it was, or after it came from dead even with us and it went past us is when we noticed the rest of the lights. They was equally spaced apart in this half-mile distance across. They was exactly level with each other, exactly horizontal. They also was very bright, appeared like the same lights as all the 4 corner lights. They was flashing in no particular form. One would flash and the other one, there was no rhythm or pattern to it whatsoever. As it traveled past us, it was gradually slowing down. It gets to what we thought was the edge of Stephenville. It came to a complete stop. It hadn't changed altitude any. It was still at the 2,500 to 3,000 foot altitude. The lights in the rear reconfigured to an arch going upward, more like a football turned sideways. That lasted for 3 or 4 seconds. Then the light suddenly appeared into a vertical. It was the horizontal, then it went to a bow, and then it went to a vertical. Then about 2 or 3 seconds later, there became 2 sets of these 7 lights, both vertical. They appeared to be about 1/4 to 1/2 mile apart, and they was all flashing like they had normally done. And then 2 or 3 more seconds, it turned to a flame. and it looked like the flame was kind of contained into a rectangular shape about 50 yards wide and about 150 yards tall. And it was a real light white-colored fire. It looked like it was contained in a rectangle box because of its outline of the fire, but there was two sets of it. Each one of these vertical scenarios turned into a flame job. Everything had about a 2 or 3 second delay to it, like it had the arch, and then it went to a vertical scenario and they was flashing, and then about 3 seconds later it had two sets of vertical 7 lights, and then 2 or 3 seconds later it went to the flyer, and then 2 or 3 seconds it was gone completely. It was probably 50 yards wide and 150 yards tall, contained in two rectangle boxes, and it was just like it was something biblical, and it was just right there. It wasn't way out in space where, you see things zipping around. This was very up close and personal. After this happened, we stood there and talked about it for 2 or 3 minutes. What the hell could this have been, blah, blah, blah. And here it comes, and it looked to be a little bit lower than it was the first time. It had the two lights in the front as it come past us. You could see the two lights in the front. You could also see two giant round orbs, is what I would describe it as, come by, and there was a real bright glowing red. Inside each orb, there's two of them in the rear, had a white light like the original first ones we saw. And then within about 3 to 4 seconds, here comes two F-16s in pursuit chasing them, the same direction, same heading, same altitude, but they wasn't doing a very good job of catching it. And we watched it until it went out of sight, probably 20 or 25 miles going east.
Were the jets still in pursuit?
Yes, they did have their afterburners on. Several pilot buddies of mine that lives further to the east heard the sound barrier break, a double sound barrier. So obviously somebody had to authorize the excessive speed to, because breaking the sound barrier is illegal. Plus this thing was at 2,000, 2,500 foot. Very unusual to have military jets in our area flying that fast. I saw what I saw, hell or high water, I guess you could say. I've had several strange phone calls from different people that they was sure educated and knowledgeable. They didn't identify themselves. They just said, be careful, I'm being watched. What I say and do will be carefully scrutinized, and I could be in danger.
The high strangeness of the Texas events provoked constant phone calls and emails to Angela Joyner at the Stephenville Empire-Tribune newspaper. She wanted to stay on the UFO reports, but newspaper management told her to move on to other local stories. Overwhelmed by the stress of conflicting priorities, on Friday, February 1st, Angela submitted her 2-week resignation notice. But the newspaper editor and publisher told her to leave on Thursday, February 7th. I talked with Angela Joyner about what she was facing prior to February 1st, 2008.
At the time, I was the only full-time reporter at the paper. And it's a very small newspaper. This is a small town.
Yes, I remember seeing a population sign when I was there at about 15,000.
That's right. The magnitude of the story drained the resources that the newspaper had. I mean, everybody pitched in and tried to help out, but there was hundreds of calls and so many emails. We did have very good paper sales through the month of January, but 1 month of good sales doesn't really add more people to your staff. Eventually, it was a lot for me. It was a lot for that paper when I was asked to not report anymore on UFO things. I was still getting lots of phone calls and emails, and so I tried to direct those to after hours and to my home computer. Anyway, I just ended up putting in my notice. Sometimes, you try to please everybody, and what happens is you don't please anybody.
So on the issue of was Angela fired or did she resign, could you explain that in your own terms? What led up to your submitting your resignation?
I turned in my resignation when I realized my employer was unhappy with my performance, or at least that was my view. And so a week later, I go in, and they're very upset with me. I don't really know what happened, but they had taken my computer and my Rolodex. They said various things. I think they were overwhelmed also, and they asked me to leave, and so I did. It was quite an emotional day for me.
Had somebody come to you specifically to say, don't report any more about the UFO activity here because?
Well, the editor and publisher felt our readership had just grown tired of the stories. They just felt it was time to move on to a new topic.
But it seemed to me when I was there from the 29th of January that there was, in fact, more intense interest.
Yes, and judging from the phone calls and the emails. So they just felt that I wasn't following their directions. I guess because I just didn't drop it entirely. I'm not sure. It's just hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. Now, Steve Allen, Ricky Sorrells, Leroy Gayton, police officers that remain unnamed, all described having phone calls intimidating them or trying to persuade them that something military and natural was going on, and they felt like pressure was being put on them individually. Do you think it's possible that some authority in our government was putting pressure on the publisher of the Stephenville newspaper?
No, I don't think that at all. I don't believe anybody military contacted them. I think if that had been the case, they would have pulled me aside and said, this is what's happened. I just believe it was in their judgment that enough of the UFO stuff and let's go on. And I just thought it might be the best thing at the time would be just to end the relationship.
So you were doing this on your own volition?
Yes. Nobody threatened me. Nobody contacted me like anyone that I thought was military or anything like that asking me to drop the stories. That did not happen. I didn't want to give up the investigations on the UFOs. I didn't want to abandon those witnesses. I tried to honor their wishes by directing that attention to after hours and to my home. Apparently, that wasn't the right thing to do in their eyes. I just really think the whole thing's just unfortunate.
What are you going to do next, do you think?
I wish I knew. I've already done some freelance things. Steve Allen had already begun a website.
I'm curious if you have seen anything highly unusual in the sky yourself.
No, I have not. And I do look up at the sky a lot more now. I'm more observant, but the way that it has turned the witnesses, just rocked their world, turned their world upside down, I'm not sure I want to see it.
The video that impressed me the most in terms of an aerial object, the projection of the symbols that David Carone took near the Stephenville airport.
Yes, I interviewed him. I saw that video also. I've never seen anything like that. Of course, you have to realize that I am new to the UFO world. I was really impressed with that video. It's really not explainable, I don't believe. When I talked with David, he even showed me, here's how I put the camera up against the pole on my French porch to try to keep it steady. And he seemed completely amazed by it also. I watched it all the way through 2 times. It was just unusual to see lights dance around like that in the sky. One of them said, it looks like hieroglyphics, and I thought, yeah, it does. I thought it was unusual, too, because the thing doesn't just, like, curve. It makes 90-degree angles, 40-degree angles, and then it'll have curvy spots in it.
And with all those different colors, almost striped and speckled.
Right, and, and it was so brilliantly colored. I mean, just very intense, bright colors that I really couldn't decide, is this something moving and it's streaking like that, or is this actually just what you see? I mean, can you not keep up with it with your naked eye? I really don't know.
Mm-hmm. It appears to be projections every 15 frames, which is a half a second. Every half a second, each of those hieroglyphs or symbols is changing to a new one.
Yes, it is sort of a pulsating effect.
I talked with Leroy Gayton. His wife has taken photographs that appear to be the same thing. They look like the symbols and have all of those multiple colors in them.
Yes, I've seen his pictures. They do look the same.
I got an aviation map of restricted areas around the Glenrose, Stephenville, Dublin region. And here is this big white circle of the Bush Crawford compound in the middle. And the compound is not more than 60 miles away from most of the sites where these phenomena have been seen and or videotaped or photographed. Have you had anybody speculate or suggest to you that whatever it is could be flaunting itself because of the Crawford Ranch Bush administration proximity?
Well, more than flaunting itself, not really going in that direction, but I have had comments on the two F-16s that Steve Allen saw that appeared to be in pursuit of the thing that came over him the second time. And some people are speculating that the object crossed the Crawford airspace, which is the reason those jets scrambled after it. Other than that, I don't have any more information.
And it's clear to everyone, including pilots, what a phony excuse that was days after January 8th for the military to try to be blaming all of the dozens of eyewitnesses from January 1st, starting into late January, on 10 F-16s in a 2-hour period between 6 and 8, only on January 8th.
When I did the first story, I immediately began making phone calls to the bases that I thought would be relevant, and that's when I got in touch with Major Lewis at the Naval Air Station in Fort Worth, and it used to be called Carswell Air Force Base. He was very nice and said, let me see what I can find out for you if we did have jets in the area, because I was relating the story of the two F-16s in pursuit of the object, according to Steve Allen. And he did call me back the next day and say there could have been jets from some other base, but they weren't ours. Then the next thing I know is 2 weeks later, I'm getting a call for a radio interview about the Air Force backtracking on their statement. And that was the first I had heard of it. Mm-hmm. He didn't send me the press release, and he didn't call me, so I called him. His demeanor had absolutely changed, and it was quite clear that he was probably reading something over the phone to me. I feel like possibly maybe he was reprimanded because he would just say, Miss Joyner, at this time, all I can say is, and he would read.
Your point is that when you first called him soon after the January 8th evening where so many people saw all the lights and started calling you at the newspaper on the next day,
mm-hmm.
that you were able to talk with this naval officer and to talk in a conversational way about what could be happening.
Right. He was just a regular guy, real friendly, very congenial, and it would be just like me talking to you.
But by the third week in January or thereabouts, he was very stiff, very formal, and was only reading to you a prepared statement on the phone.
That's what it sounded like. I think he was reading, and he was a lot more cautious.
Did you say, sir, off the record, could you tell me what kind of pressure have you had from higher authorities to shut this story up?
I did try to go in that direction, but he would still just say, Miss Joyner, all I can say is this. So I could see that something had changed. He certainly wasn't the same guy that I had spoken with a couple of weeks before.
Angela is talking about Major Carl Lewis, a spokesman for the 301st Fighter Wing at the Joint Reserve Base Naval Air Station in Fort Worth. Major Lewis originally told Angela Joyner that, quote, no F-16s or other aircraft from his base were in the area the night of January 8th, unquote. And that's when most people reported the sightings. Angela also learned that officials at the region's 2 Air Force bases, Dyess in Abilene and Shepherd in Wichita Falls, said they did not have any aircraft in the Dublin and Stephenville, Texas area the first week of January 2008.
Thanks for listening to this Earthfiles podcast from the edges of science, environment, and real X-Files. Go to www.earthfiles.com to see more than 1,000 Earthfiles reports with photographs, drawings, and documents. And visit Earthfiles every day, every week for new reports and new podcasts. That's www.earthfiles.com.